Hey Sushiets, this is a ride-along video, a speed build of the pitch deck, the PowerPoint for that proposal assignment. This kind of ride-along is a bit longer because I did not speed it up quite as much as I usually do, so you could better kind of see what I was just clicking on. And so I just start out here with kind of my old version of the PowerPoint, and it's going through with like something I had previously created, kind of scoping out what I would want to change, how it was, and again it's like fine-ish, but we can definitely do a lot better with it. So I'm hopping into the stock images from Microsoft. Notice, right, us as 365 subscribers through the university, right, we can use all of this creative content. We don't have to worry about any like copyright or even citing, acknowledging it. We can just drop it into our PowerPoints. So whenever possible, try to use that. When we have images, right, it can be hard to see the text. And so you're right, inserted just a shape, just a nice little box. And I'm adjusting that transparency on it through the shape format and fill options, so that way you can still read the text and kind of see that image through it. So definitely try that trick, so that way you can have really visual slides that are still literally readable. All right, so now going into this, I liked the idea of the Venn diagram and the circles to kind of represent, right, the different areas of the problem. I have my proposal document up on that side, so that way I can, read through it and kind of look through it. But I just didn't really like the aesthetic, frankly, of the Venn diagram, and it wasn't really representing what I wanted it to the best. Like I didn't really get the sense that you could understand this is happening at the center of the three issues. And I didn't like that they were all the same color, harder to track, they're different things. So my first idea was to just make them three circles and then, maybe play around with some sort of morph or animation, but they weren't fitting on the page kind of the way I wanted. So I just decided to scrap that idea entirely and went into the SmartArt. So with the SmartArt, grabbed this idea of a list because I'm really just listing out three things, and found one that, I kind of liked, kind of jived with. So opened up that text pane so I could edit my SmartArt graphic easier. When you're dealing with SmartArt, definitely go to the designs text pane so you can type directly into that for your bullet points, instead of trying to do it inside the SmartArt itself. And so now with this new design that the Venn diagram didn't really allow me to do is actually expand on the factors inside of each problem. So degree cost, retention, ROI, job placement, biggest issues, underemployment, and some legislation around job placement requirements for universities, labor demand, that idea of the middle training. I go ahead and delete the other slide and do something I call convert to shapes, which with a SmartArt, it's all one big object. So if you go into that shape format, that design tab, and convert it into individual shapes, now I basically have the pre-formatted graphics of the SmartArt, but in individual aspects. And so I was just going through, so that way I could kind of combine and group it, so that way I could move them all together, but as three different basically bullet points. And playing around with this background image, so it kind of like follows from the original page, but I said I didn't actually like that. So to prepare for what we call a morph transition, I duplicated my slide with my little shapes. Morph transition is looking for exact, so duplicated or copied elements across two different slides, so that way it can basically fill in the space, the differences between those two elements. So I duplicated it, so all of my old assets, original assets, are still there, and I have it in that gray space below my slide deck, which basically, it's saved for you, but you can't see it. So when I'm presenting, anything in the gray area is literally not going to be seen. And so you'll see when I kind of finish the morph how that operates, and why it's important to keep. Since this is about fiscal stuff and investments, right, I'm looking for, again, the Microsoft library, search for like investment, cost, money kind of images. I came up with this, coin. So it's representing people spend a lot of money, right, on college, and then adding this, kind of text box, super high contrast, with that key statistic that I want to talk about, that really outlines the fiscal cost idea, as well as that loss in kind of what we were calling the social prestige, that is associated with having kind of going to college, which is something I just found right in my literature surveys and things from people that specifically talked about the social prestige of having a degree as a pressure to go to college. So duplicated that page again. Now I was looking for something that would represent like underemployment, and ultimately settled on this idea of just frustration instead of like targeting. First I was like looking at baristas and was like, no, that's like rude, honestly, and like not really representing what I mean. So when it comes to this idea of job placement, it's more that everybody is sort of frustrated at their salaries and their jobs and things once they graduate, because there's such a saturation of people with degrees, that created a really competitive market space. Then again, adding that kind of extra little detail with the high contrast boxes, duplicating it all once again, moving it up back into insert images, stock library, typed in training. That didn't work. Typed in specialist, didn't like it. IT didn't like it. Electric stuff didn't really like it. So you can probably find everything that you need there. You just have to try prompting it a little bit differently. And so this idea of the labor demand is really that we need people with these technical specialized skills and what we call middle training, which is like you have the core skill, but then you also have these foundational leadership, social kind of skills that you get from a college degree. And so that's the idea of kind of a middle trained person. So now I'm applying that morph transition. And so this is where, right, all those elements I had duplicated are just morphing the differences between them across the slides. And so I duplicate this final slide where I want all of those elements to come back down so I can do like a summary. So that's where I'm grabbing all the things that were in the gray space. So that way when I do the morph transition, PowerPoint will be like, oh yeah, I remember this like object. It used to be up here, so now I can like slide it down into this area. So it's really just a way to get very customized transitions with just the elements that you want, whereas the auto kind of pre-format transitions just aren't able to pick up on those specific kind of object placements. And so I'm, testing it all out. You can see like, well, that white page was clipping in front of it in a way that I didn't like. And so I just went back and sent that white background to back. So that way it would always be in the right position. And I also am playing with this like little 3D object of a hat, so you can go with the 3D models and do some really kind of neat stuff. I overall liked that slide. I just changed like the color scheme so it's easier to read the idea of a TS degree. I didn't like it had kind of like weird bad contrast and just felt out of place with all of my new design decisions. And yeah, so we can see it now morphing together into that new page. Trying to decide what I wanted to do here. I knew I didn't really like the existing page, but I liked the concept of it being like smushed in between. And so I was just trying to make a little bit of a game plan, thinking through, and ultimately decided, okay, let's have an intermediate kind of page where I can talk about the details of this tradesmith degree that I'm proposing, years, what you would be learning, gaining from it. And that would kind of set up the transition a little bit better for me. So right, duplicated, I have the two kind of wings out in that gray area. So that way when I duplicate one more time, have that transition, it will know, hey, I want you to bring in these side pieces. So it'll kind of look like, right, the tradesman degree is in the middle of the two. Just resizing the text boxes, make sure it kind of like fits on the border and everything. and then moving that little hat into the center, so that way it just keeps moving around the page. With the 3D models, if you adjust its orientation, you can do some cool stuff. Oh, so here, important, slide master. I basically didn't like the gold bars on each side that were kind of like cluttering up the page, but they were something on the template itself. So I typed in slide master, and this is where you can make universal changes across the board. And so that's how now on all these other slides, I got rid of those gold bars, because I went into my slide master and said, I don't want these. Or you can go into slide master and add something like a banner that would apply to all your slides. So finished that little section, added a new page looking for images of construction, because I really wanted an idea of a blueprint actually, so I could now introduce the plan of my tradesman degree more specifically. I'm grabbing the SmartArt from my proposal document that kind of got written up just so I would have that. And since they're both like Microsoft products, copying the SmartArt directly over, it recognized that this is a SmartArt asset and not an image. You can change things like the animations through those effect options there to come in at different like rate speeds, you know, but it still wasn't what I wanted. So I went back into convert to shape. So that way I would have individual little objects that I could specifically manipulate and bring in the way that I wanted. And that's just kind of like what I'm working on here. I want each one to fly in so I can talk about it differently. And I had them flying in from like bottom, top, bottom. So that way it was a little bit more dynamic as well. I'm gonna duplicate this page. So I have those same assets since it's already created, just moving their position. So that way I am gonna be able to really talk about more specifically. Decided just to delete it, and I just wanted the years. So that way when I have this table, people are going to definitely read the table too much. I wanted something that I could also cover basically, and help represent which year of the table we were talking through. Now, inserting a text box, so that way I could have a kind of a subheading, a title. This is right UCCS kind of case study data that I'm using as a proof of concept for my proposal. The more, and what I was really doing there is getting a super bold, as thick of a weight, as bold, as kind of stocky and thick of a font as I could, because I'm going to go into this format, go into the fill options, format text, and fill it with a picture. And so I actually am filling it with the picture of the table to kind of like represent, oh, like my case study data idea is coming from UCCS, adjusted things like the line weight so you could actually still read the text, and decided to make it really, really big. The bigger and bolder and thicker your font, the better any photo fill is going to look. Here is trying to do something where maybe it could like zoom into the letter, but I couldn't really get it to work, so I just decided, forget that, we'll just like transition into it like normal, it's fine. And then using right those year banners to cover up the areas of the table that I don't want them to focus on. People will read ahead. Duplicating, adjusting the size, transparency every time, so that way when I do the morph transition, they will grow and shrink and change as I'm talking. Again, it's just the way to get these custom transitions that the pre-formatted ones are not gonna really allow you to do. That's how you make more unique slide decks that aren't just like random boring default templates. Now I am grabbing still that little like graduation hat. I just like that 3D object, and grabbed a little text box so I could write in basically the summary of what you're getting with the tradesman degree, by sort of following my plan, my proposal. And I'm just, adjusting, make sure it's easy to read for slide decks, for PowerPoints. Big font is good where you want people in the back to be able to see it. and grabbing another SmartArt, using some of its pre kind of tools, opening that text pane so that way I can again type in, here's what you get. Experience a college environment, right? You will get to go to college just for, shorter time studying a specific thing. Kind of going back to that second element of, what do you get out of it? Apprenticeship work, great, we love that. And all your licenses and tests kind of completed. And, just adjusting the shape, the size, the layout with your 90 credit kind of degree experience. Again, doing the effect options, having it come in one box at a time. Also on the effect options for 3D models, I'm having it turn. And so you can have it just kind of, with the 3D models specifically, you can have them rotate and turn with your animation effects. And just to give your slides a little something like special, extra zhuzh, get people to like tune back into what you're saying, paying attention. Then I wanted to set up this slide of clearly laying out, here's what the initial issues that led to this proposal, and here's how my proposal addresses those issues and problems. And so ending my PowerPoint, ending my pitch with that very, very clear, explicit line of, this was a problem, this proposal addresses that problem. So it'd be really easy for people to see. I did have to adjust what it said just to fit on the page. So sometimes it's not just, oh, let me make it smaller. Smaller is not usually better in a PowerPoint because people can't see it. Instead, it's let me change the wording, let me change the writing so that way it fits but still conveys the meaning. Then this last thing, went back to the stock images, and I wanted to pull a good photo of like people in these mid-training technical jobs, basically. Tradesman jobs, because my idea was then to have that graduation photo, right, morph into these, people with a job. So I tried to get people that were kind of in similar positioning, and now I am just playing with the pre-format one, so it will just fade into, and I can end with a punchy like, and you will graduate, directly kind of into these really good middle jobs. So now I'm going through and testing everything. I'm just kind of clicking through, looking at it, realize, oh, my morph wasn't on that slide. So basically at this stage, and this is also how I rehearse without having to practice my presentations that much, is I go through, and as I'm double checking that everything looks the way I want, I'm also in my head kind of thinking about what I would say and going through some of that practice. And every time I see something that I don't like or I realize the timing's off, immediately stop, fix it, and then restart the rehearsal essentially. So by the end of my kind of finalizing, proofing my slide decks, I've also actually gone through and practiced my presentation a few times. So that way I only do like 1 or 2 true dress rehearsals. That's kind of my style. But obviously you have to figure out your own amount of style. Some of you might need a lot of full on dress rehearsal practices. Others of you, might be a little bit more like me of wing it, but you are able to wing it based on just your public speaking confidence itself. And so that's why I'm pausing so much, as I literally am thinking through, and here's how I would describe what's happening on this slide. Kind of doing a little bit of that marking in my head and making sure that everything I need on the slide deck appears. Also, didn't have the morph on that, and so I had to go back and fix it. So that way it, there, you can kind of see the difference of just changing slides versus morph is gonna bring down those duplicated aspects and assets into their new position. And I'm kind of practicing what I would say, what would I want to talk about with this, big table, and how, in year 2, after you do your regular freshman gen ed credits, year 2, we do some electives of your choice, but you start your internship, apprenticeship, and then in your final year, it's basically all apprenticeship, and then preparing for your certification, following what the ed students do, those who have to do teacher training and pass their teacher certification, building on that model. Here I thought that the hat was like turning a little bit too fast, and so I'm just kind of playing around with that animation pane, making sure that it, is spinning the way I want it to. Again, 3D models are kind of fun, really underutilized, but you can do some more unique stuff with it. Here I realized as I was doing my run through that I messed that up, and it's actually 2 years of apprenticeship work, not 1 year. So making those edits and adjustments as well. I don't think I ever go back and fix this, because also there's a line of like, sometimes you just got to get things done. I do wish I had fixed the alignment so that way they were all even, or at least more meaningful, kind of like why is job placement sticking out too much. I'm pretty sure I don't fix it, and it is what it is. I would probably go back and do that later if I could, but I don't. And sometimes that's just how it is. We'll have little tiny mistakes or always things that we would want to change. And I'm just, again, in my head thinking through how all of that would work. And so now I'm just gonna hop into like a final walkthrough so you can see what it all actually ultimately turned out. And so I have my title page where I get to introduce the tradesmith degree. I do have a pre-formatted transition there, so it just fades into those 3 issues. Here's where that morph transition comes in. So we see the investment, suddenly going. Then another morph transition. So all the stuff on that slide goes up into that gray area. All the stuff on this slide goes up into that gray area. So remember, in the back end, all of these assets are together. So that way, when I do this last morph transition, they all get kind of pulled back down and into this new place. So I can recap demand, investment, job placement. Then I did a pre-formatted transition into, and the tradesmith degree is the solution for all of that. This was a morph, 3 years. You get your gen eds, then you get your licensed skill, a morph so it looks like it's smushed between an associate's degree of 2 years, that's just gen ed, and our traditional 4 years that people aren't finishing. Here's my blueprint, got that blueprint from the Creative Cloud, having each of my elements of my SmartArt that I converted to shapes come in as individual animation so I could talk through and then prompt when I wanted each of those boxes to join the page. For the UCCS case study, really big bold font that I used the format options to make a photo fill. Then we have another morph transition or series of morph transitions so I can talk through the actual plan of the table without people getting too distracted by the content. And it's morphing right every time that duplicated object. Have my 3D model is doing a rotation animation, so it'll just keep rotating like that on a cycle. As I have my kind of summary, in 90 credits, you're gonna get to experience college, live in the dorms, all that kind of stuff. You'll get 2 years of apprenticeship work with a partner, and then you'll graduate license into the trade of choice. Returning back to investment was a problem. Oh, this is a shorter degree, but you still get to go to college. Job placement was a problem. We're going to partner you with an actual apprenticeship so you are literally getting employed while you work. Labor demand, we need people licensed in all these different trades. This would license you. You'll graduate right into these similarly salaried, very stable in-demand jobs with that tradesmith degree, ending with my kind of title slide. All right, have fun with your PowerPoint, but also actively think about how each component and transition and animation is unique to you, is dynamic to you, and is customized to what you're trying to say. All right, thanks, associates. Vibes.